William Graham Sumner was a social philosopher of the late 19th century. As such, he was deeply interested in the dynamics of a society, especially an ever-changing one like the United States. Although his claims were often based on opinion or a single observation, Sumner's work has greatly influenced the sociological community and is still considered revolutionary to this day. The son of two English immigrants, his views about the world were shaped from a young age. The ideals of abstaining from alcohol, having autonomy, and taking responsibility were ingrained in him, and he carried this piety until his death. In addition, the experiences of some of his family members led Sumner to believe that progress and change could be detrimental to a society. Over time, these ideas manifested into complex thoughts as he furthered his education. In 1863, Sumner received his degree from Yale University at the age of 23. He then went on to study in 3 other countries, including Germany. Throughout his time abroad, he was heavily influenced by the people he met, especially Herbert Spencer, a man involved in many fields of thought. When he returned home, Sumner faced an intense battle between religion and science. With time, science prevailed. He became a professor at Yale who taught social and political science. Interestingly enough, Sumner himself claimed he, quote, did not know the rules of the game and did not want to learn, end quote, when he later reflected on his knowledge of politics. Still, Sumner was extremely active in society. During his professorship, he joined the Young Yale movement, which aimed to modernize universities so they had a more scientific and philosophical basis rather than a religious one. Through all these experiences, Sumner developed very straightforward opinions about economics, politics, and rights. First and foremost, Sumner supported a laissez-faire economy in which the government had no involvement. He was adamant about his belief that individual freedoms were more important than a corrupt economy that could support the development of a plutocracy. In this system, the extremely wealthy would rule the nation. Even though this was unlikely to be officially endorsed, Sumner feared that the heads of large businesses could exact their influence on an already tedious legislature that only stood to benefit from investments in those companies. In his view, if the government sided with the so-called captains of industry, the poor and even members of the middle class, like his immigrant parents, would become subject to an economy that forced them into extremely hard times. Further, Sumner believed that people of a lower socioeconomic status would be very susceptible to government regulations and other forms of legislation that, in reality, were passed by a few elite men of the time. He coined the term the forgotten man to represent the men and women who paid their taxes and worked hard to earn a living only to suffer from the hardships associated with the economy. In his opinion, while some aspects of the government were good for the people of the United States, recent legislation failed to represent everyone and would therefore not be good for society as a whole. However, Sumner maintained that people should follow a government's laws as long as they still possess civil liberties and economic freedom because he was a strong supporter of classical liberalism. Diving deeper into economic issues, Sumner drew on prior experiences to shape his view of progress and the growth of industry. Ultimately, Sumner saw machinery and other innovations as implements that destroyed a family's livelihood by diminishing the worth of their labor. All the same, he was fairly aloof to the plight of the farmers due to his geographic positioning and relative isolation from more distant areas of the nation. Nonetheless, while Sumner was sympathetic to the poor, his economic standing and studies of successful economies prevented him from supporting any sort of redistribution of wealth or equalization that would have brought the classes closer together monetarily. To him, people were naturally going to be lower in status, while others were more elevated. Thus, he was strongly against socialism in any form and disliked labor unions. Despite their goals that would have likely aided the forgotten man, Sumner believed labor unions were, quote, harmful monopolies, end quote, that would upset an intricate economy. Therefore, in the general sense, Sumner was very much against progress and innovation, whether it be for industry or for the people. The bulk of Sumner's work was about sociology, and while some of his views were controversial, he's considered a founding father of sociology in America. He once wrote, quote, the truth is that cupidity, selfishness, envy, malice, lust, vindictiveness are constant vices of human nature. They are not confined to classes or to nations or particular ages of the world. They present themselves in the palace, in the parliament, in the academy, in the church, in the workshop, and in the hovel. They appear in autocracies, theocracies, aristocracies, democracies, and ochlocracies, all alike, end quote. In that essay, he essentially stated that human nature was universally the same despite the differences created over time and space. Sumner looked at this concept further when he wrote his book, What Social Classes Owe to Each Other, the cover page of which is pictured here. In this book, it's made clear that a lot of his major beliefs involve something called social Darwinism. Although it inaccurately applied the works of Charles Darwin, this philosophy did state that there was a natural order under which society was maintained. Consequently, society could not be changed by any sort of human intervention, and as such, it was useless to try to change it. Sumner prescribed to this ideology, and he also asserted that a society could only be maintained if people did not try to change it, furthering his hatred of labor unions. This belief also served the purpose of justifying his opinion that the government should not be involved in society unless it was to provide people with laws or to guarantee their liberties. Another aspect of Sumner's philosophical beliefs were his creation of mores and folkways. These were both considered social norms, but mores determined right and wrong while folkways dictated common interactions amongst people. Although they were revolutionary at the time, these ideas are still part of sociology to this day and are considered major aspects of human society. Sumner was strongly against imperialism. Together, Sumner's sociological knowledge and keen observations combined to form his disdain of imperialism and overall dislike of overpowering governments. In his fight against American imperialism, Sumner became the vice president of the Anti-Imperialist League. He fervently opposed the Spanish-American War and subsequent acquisition of the Philippines. While it had a political basis, Sumner's opposition was mainly rooted in his belief that imperialism stemmed from ethnocentrism. This meant that certain races or societies were inherently superior to others, and Sumner despised this thought. However, even though he tried to end the imperialistic tendencies of the United States, the country continued to expand. Overall, William Graham Sumner was an important social philosopher of the late 19th century whose influential and controversial ideas still impact society today. While he is largely forgotten, the ideas he contributed to America should not be overlooked, for they still apply despite the tests of time.